Welcome to the Serious Leisure Podcast. I am Petya Petrova.
Hi, I'm Kat Branch.
Hi, I'm Sam Elkington.
Sam is from Teesside University. Kat and I work at UWE Bristol, where this podcast is produced. This podcast is a place for us to share stories about leisure. We talk about how we balance work and life commitments with leisure time. We reflect on the profound impact leisure can have on our lives. We draw from the serious leisure perspective in our discussions to help us unpack our experiences. We're joined here today by our podcast guest, Justin Iriajen. Justin is social media manager at UWE Bristol. Welcome, Justin.
Hi.
Justin is here to talk about his passion for DJing. But before we delve into Justin's DJ life, let us find out a little bit about his professional role. Justin, can you please tell us what you do for a living?
So I'm the social media manager for UWE Bristol, which involves managing all the key social media channels for the university, dealing with incoming queries, creating content, sharing content, just trying to kind of engage our students, trying to engage external partners, prospective students, and trying to have some fun as well. Social media is fun, so creating some good content for people to engage with. That's it really.
Thanks, Justin. So social media manager sounds a lot of fun and quite engaging, but you, outside of your job, are also doing a little bit of work and engagement with DJing. So can you tell us a little bit about your DJing story? Where did it start and how did it start? How did it progress and where we currently find you?
Okay, so I think in terms of my DJing story, you probably have to start from just my love of music, which I think if you spoke to anyone who calls themselves a DJ, that's where it all begins. They're pure love of music. So my love of music, really, I think the earliest I can kind of trace it back to was probably when I was kind of 12, 13, really, when I really kind of started seeking out music that I actually enjoyed rather than just having to listen to whatever my parents played in the car, which was generally a lot of Motown and reggae, which I hated when I got to 12, 13. But then now I realize it's actually good music and it was a good foundation for me. But when I got to kind of 12, 13, I started listening to kind of rap as it was known then, hip hop. Formed a duo with one of my friends called A to J. Called A to J because he was called Andrew and I'm called Justin. So, of course it was very original, creative back then. So, we kind of started from what we started first doing was like kids' poems, like rapping kids' poems, really, and then using that as a basis, changing the words a little bit to essentially write raps and recording ourselves on tapes, which was, I'd love to know like if he still got those tapes, because that would be funny to listen to. But so that was kind of like my earliest time. I remember kind of really sort of seeing it as something I really enjoyed and kind of wanted to get into.
Justin, before you continue, I've become aware that some people don't know what tapes are.
Oh, yeah. Well, for those of us that are, in our probably over 30, I guess.
In our prime.
In Justin. Our prime, yeah. Well said, Kat. Tapes were something you could record to, something that essentially they were kind of like plastic rectangles with a tape in. I say a tape, I mean like a little bit of plastic rope essentially within it, and you could record music on it, and you could buy albums on it, you could buy singles on it. A lot of the time, if there was a bit of music you loved and you played it every day eventually it would get stuck in your tape player, because obviously you needed a tape player to play tapes, and you would have to try and untangle it all and sometimes tape it back together. So and if you played it too much, eventually it would just snap or it would just sound rubbish. So it was great fun in a way, and that's all we had at the time. It was modern technology at the time. It came after vinyl, and it was kind of cheap, and you could fit more music on it than you could vinyl, essentially. It had the added bonus of actually you could buy blank cassettes and you could record anything you wanted on it. So that's what we used to use. And my friend had a little portable tape player, which was also you could also record on. And I actually remember it had like a special feature of it was bass boost. Anyone who also had a Walkman, probably back those, that was always used to be the special feature, little bass boost. So you'd click the bass boost and it would just up the bass like a little notch, and you think, oh, amazing. Really, it's really amazing.
I think our listeners are really missing out on the visual of Kat and Sam smiling and nodding through this description and revisiting our youth.
This is what I like to call the good old days.
Yeah. The glory years.
True though, because actually it was the first time you could record your own stuff, which is what I really love, Justin, is that you couldn't get vinyl and then record you rapping with a pal on vinyl, could you? So that's why cassettes were so great.
And also something else you could do, Kat, is you could mix the songs up. So you could record different songs together. So you could record stuff from the radio, put some other stuff on there from another tape. So you have to be really on it to be able to do that with the digital side of things these days. But it was actually analog. I love it.
Analog, I love it. Wow, I have to say, I'd love to know if your friend Andrew still got those tapes, Justin. That would be amazing. Anyway, I interrupted your story, so I didn't know you had to do a media history today, did you? So I'll let you pick it back up.
So that was that was kind of my first sort of foray, I guess, into music, into kind of almost like following a passion, really. That was when I was kind of 12, 13. And then, a little bit later on, when I got to kind of 15, just through doing music at school, I sort of took an interest in wanting to teach myself to play guitar. So I kind of done that, really. I bought myself a guitar from my pocket money, just a cheap acoustic thing. I bought some, you probably can still buy them, but albums, you could go into like Virgin Megastore kind of back then, and you could buy like the music score for albums. I forgot what the actual sort of technical term for it is. Kat might be able to help me, but you could essentially buy, and it would have like the different chords and the notes that you had to play. I'd go there, and actually, I think what I used to do, because I didn't have much money, is I'd go into Virgin Megastore and just write down, have a bit of paper and just write down the chords and then take it home and then try and strum along to the album that I would be listening to on cassette. Or actually, no, at that point it was CD. So we'd moved into the kind of the next stage, really.
Sorry, Justin, can you just give us the history of the CD as well?
Then we'll move on to the mini disc. And
I love what you're saying, Justin. Sorry to interrupt you again, but when I was doing my music training, the one thing I wanted to learn to do, the first thing I learned to do in my formal training was to work out the chords, for the same reason, because I was tired of, you flick through and you're like, oh, okay, and I'm writing down what the chord sequence is. And so I asked my music theory teachers back when I was little, about 11. I was like, this is the one thing I want to do first to save me having to go down to HMV and thumb through. So I love the fact that you're doing that. I realised I wasn't the only one. Anyway.
And then I kind of got to the stage where actually I could listen to a song that I liked on CD, and work out that I could work out the chords. So I actually got to that point, first from the kind of the bass. I think it was like the bass, you'd work out the kind of notes, and then you'd work out the kind of chords. So I got to that stage. And then, what it's like when you're young, you move from one interest to the other. So I kind of got bored maybe of trying to learn guitar when I got to 16, 17. Obviously, being 16, 17, there were other things that came into my life in terms of trying to, chat out women, all this sort of stuff. So there were other interests. And also, to be honest, I think I kind of hit a ceiling really with teaching myself to play guitar, in terms of the next stage to me was kind of learning the scales really, and I just couldn't really get my head around it. But yeah, no, I got to a decent stage, and I think I kind of got to a stage where I could play what you call rhythm guitar, isn't it? It's like rhythm guitar essentially. So I could have, some of my friends who played drums and bass and were kind of a lot more talented than me, I would have like a jam sort of session with them now and again. So yeah, I enjoyed that. And then kind of 16, 17, sort of spent less time on it. And then, that kind of takes me on to university, really. So when I came to university, obviously I was 18 then, I was in university, big bright lights of Bristol. And obviously just got into clubbing, got into drum and bass. I mean, it's probably worth saying I was into a lot of different music anyway. I wasn't kind of restricted by a certain genre. I kind of, as I say, early on, really into kind of hip hop. And then from learning guitar, got into more kind of, guitar bands. I was, all the obvious ones really of kind of, things like Nirvana really. And I suppose, when I was 15, there was like Oasis and that kind of indie stuff as well. Rage Against the Machine I used to like as well. That kind of stuff I liked. And probably something worth mentioning as well, which kind of fueled a lot of the music I liked, was I used to sort of skateboard. So I was into skateboarding. So on, get skateboarding videos. So that's another medium from the 90s, VHS. So on VHS, skateboarding videos, they would have all sorts of music, but mainly hip hop and rock, really punk music. So I kind of learned about different bands and different rappers and stuff like that from kind of watching skateboard videos. So moving on, came to university, started going clubbing, and the music I was clubbing to was drum and bass really, and anyone who knows Bristol knows there's a big link with Bristol and drum and bass. Got Ronnie Size and people like that. So, and especially when I was at university, kind of early 2000s, it was drum and bass was huge, especially in Bristol. Drum and bass and hip hop, obviously hip hop, and actually UK hip hop was pretty big at that time. So I was doing that, and the people I kind of lived with in my student houses, they were all into DJing in one form or another. So I was living with people who actually had turntables, and it was vinyl turntables back then. I kind of, through just always having someone in the house who had turntables, I kind of took an interest into it. And like with all things that I get into my life really, which I've reflected on as an adult as I've got older, is I'm someone who I'll sort of hold back for a while, almost survey the scene and then see, is this something I want to get into? But once I lock onto it and think, actually, this gives me happy feelings, this is something I want to do, then I'll immerse myself properly. And that, even talking from just my early experiences of music, of recording raps on tapes, to thinking, I want to I get a guitar and learn to play that. And there's other things, you know, I play football and stuff, and I've kind of managed teams and captained teams and done all sorts and whatever. I'm not someone who's just a passive fan, if that makes sense. Once I'm into something, I want to be properly involved. So yeah, I was learning to DJ, you know, from people with turntables in my house. Even buying the vinyl then, even though I didn't actually have my own equipment, you know, buying vinyl because I was so interested and wanting to dive in and learn more. I started collecting that kind of drum and bass vinyl back then and slowly kind of picking it up essentially. And then left university, moved into the world of work, and I was working, so immediately after I left university, I was working in IT support. I don't know why, it was just a job, essentially. Just a job to have some money and club, you know, some money to go clubbing, essentially. You know? But anyway, that job I got made redundant from, and I got payoff. And with that money, and the payoff wasn't actually that much. I was thinking about this the other day. It was like £1,500, which was not, you know, it was not really that much for a payoff. But anyway, because I was into DJing, but I didn't have any turntables at the time, I was like, well, you know, I'm getting this lump of money. What better to do than spend it on turntables? Everyone was sort of being negative. Oh, you know, this is a big waste of money. Most people who buy turntables don't keep it on, don't keep it up, essentially. But I'd already had like a kind of stack of vinyl by that point, because I've been collecting it for university and stuff. I just didn't have turntables, so bought the turntables, and yeah, I just, you know, that kind of took it on to the next level, really, because I was already at a decent standard, but I'd never DJ at a club. I'd just been your kind of standard bedroom DJ, learning on my friends' turntables. But once I got my own and I could use them anytime I want, that kind of took me to a next level, really. But the thing that kind of really kind of almost sort of put my name out there was I started a club night, so my own club night, so a drum and bass club night. So that would have been like sort of 2006, 2007. And so that allowed me to DJ in the club. And actually, you know, because anyone will tell you, especially back then, I'm not sure if it's similar now. Everyone knew a DJ, or everyone wanted to be a DJ, and there's a lot of nepotism in those circles. So for you to be asked to DJ at someone else's club night is very difficult. So almost the easiest way to kind of get your foot in the door is just to run your own night. So, you know, that wasn't the reason I was doing it. I was doing it because I was interested in drum and bass. I love drum and bass, and kind of, in fact, actually, what I was doing and what me and my friends were doing is, well, we were kind of just having our own parties, really. We were all having a good time in people's living rooms and whatever. So we're like, this is such a good vibe. Why don't we just do it in a club? So we started a night. It was called Signal. It was myself and one of my friends. So that was the kind of ethos of the night was we would pick DJs that are kind of nationally, internationally known, but they were kind of new up and comers almost. And that they would be the headliners. So we'd book one headliner, and the rest of the people in the lineup would be kind of local people, and obviously myself and my friends. So that gave me the experience of then DJing in a club. But also, apart from that, it allowed me to network with other promoters in the city. So other people that ran other club nights, because what happens in those circles are, again, back then, I'm talking 2000, people used to actually physically hand out what you call flyers, physical flyers. I think obviously now everything's done on social media. People want guest lists to your night because they want to come down and hand flyers, or they want to get someone who works for them to come down and hand flyers. So you end up just networking, you end up knowing everyone who runs club nights in the city. And then through that, you go, okay, should we collaborate? Should we do a club night together? Or do you want to come play at my club night? Or can I play at your club night? And that's how you network. So So yeah, through that, I ended up playing in loads of different clubs, getting to know loads of different promoters, and that club night went on until around 2010. But at that point, I was DJ. I kind of had a bit of a name, so I was kind of DJing at most different club nights around the city, including I was a resident at a really big club night, actually, which I can't really say the name, but it's because you'd have to beep it out. But it's how can I say it? So the first word, it's a phrase essentially, but the first word begins with S, and it's the bed. Yeah, does everyone understand what?
I think we're following you there, Justin.
But this was this is probably one of the biggest nights one of the biggest club nights in probably the country. Yeah, it's probably at that point it's probably one of the biggest nights in the country. And I was resident at that. So that was good. And it was at Motion, so Motion nightclub in Bristol, which is obviously a massive nightclub and a well known, well recognized nightclub in the country. So I was DJing at that every month. I was DJing at other little nights around more student nights really in the week. And so that was around 2010. And then after that, there's always different things with music I'm involved in. So after 2010, I started a magazine, so a music magazine. Me and 3 other friends. It was a free music magazine that was it was distributed around the country and actually internationally, because people could kind of order online. And again, that become almost like another way of networking. So not only was I networking with people just in Bristol, then it was people around the whole country, because the way we because it was a free publication, the way that it was funded was through advertising, and it was advertising normally from sort of independent record labels, artists, festivals, etc., all that sort of. So you obviously get to speak to everyone around the country. So that basically allowed me to then not only DJ in Bristol, I was DJing other parts of the country and some festivals abroad as well. I played this one called Outlook in Croatia, so I was able to play out there. So yeah, I mean, just it was another platform that gave me an opportunity. Ran that magazine for about 4 or 5 years, up until probably 2015, I think, around that time. And yeah, I mean, again, to say that, so that allowed me to DJ in places outside Bristol. Stopped the magazine, and then my oldest son was born, and this is where this is where the kind of DJing took a little bit of a backseat, really. But I was still doing bits and pieces. But yeah, obviously for anyone who has children, they kind of just envelop your whole life. Essentially, they have to. Your time is not your own anymore. You don't control your time. They control your time. So yeah, I just couldn't commit to DJing, as much as I was every weekend. So. And obviously, you kind of don't want to really in the early days either, because, you want to see your kids grow up, and, it's cliched, but they do grow up too quickly, as I'm finding, because my oldest one is 8 now. So, so I was, so kind of stopped DJing as much, but I was still probably doing once a month at least. And I was finding myself doing maybe a lot more kind of, because I was getting older, weddings as well. Doing weddings as well. And what else was doing? Your weddings and 30th birthday parties and stuff like that. And I then, so as my kids got older, so when my oldest was born, obviously slowed down, and then kind of slowed down a little bit. And my second was born a few 4 years later, slowing down, but still DJing a bit. And then that kind of takes me up to very recently, till kind of about 18 months ago. But I got offered the chance to DJ on a radio show, so I host my own radio show. So it's a local radio station called SWU FM, SWU FM, for anyone who might have heard of it. And it just allows me to really kind of continue just my passion really for music and for DJing. And it also kind of it gives me a reason to kind of keep up with music, really, because it's very different. You know, when you DJ, you really want to be, you need to be on top of what the biggest tunes are at the time, and you need to, you just need to follow it really closely, which is like a job in itself. It's like a job in itself. So when you're not DJing as regularly in clubs, and you're not being within that environment, when you're hearing other DJs or you're seeing what people are reacting to, it almost, you don't have as much of the drive to kind of seek it out as much. But now I've got a radio show, and I have to prepare for that every month. I've got, now I've put things in place where I'm constantly finding out new artists, new music, what's working in clubs, all that sort of stuff. So yeah. Sorry if that was long-winded, but that's kind of taking you my whole. It's a concise version of my kind of musical history, my DJing history. Justin,
are you still doing any kind of just recreational DJing for yourself? Or is it actually, it's just family life, just not have space for that in life now? Is it? If you don't mind me asking.
I am definitely 100%, because I just enjoy DJing. That's kind of like the basics of it. But apart from that, it's I find it therapeutic. I find DJing therapeutic, really. It's something that just allows me to block out the rest of the world, essentially. Because I'm someone who has trouble concentrating. My attention span is awful, and people say it's because you work in social media, but it's been that since I was a kid. I've always been all right. I can always kind of do okay in my studies or whatever, but my attention span's really rubbish. So there's only a few things that really allows me to focus, and DJing is one of it, and I can block it out. And actually, I will DJ sometimes when I feel I am a little bit stressed or a little bit kind of out of sorts. I think I'll just go and look. I've got my little got my little kind of man cave, should we say, and I'll just I'll say to my partner, look, I'm just gonna go and kind of go and play with my toys, essentially. So I will I'll just go into my little room and kind of just mix for like an hour or 90 minutes or whatever, and just really kind of just immerse myself into it, and it really kind of helps my mood afterwards. I will feel just in a good space.
Justin, I'm loving the description of going to play with my toys. I can empathise with that, absolutely. However, if I have to play with another Transformer again anytime soon, I'm going to lose my mind. But I wanted to ask you a question about, we're talking about there about being able to block out other anxieties, concerns, just thoughts. I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on the craft of mixing your own music, curating that music, and what it is about that gives you that experience that you just described.
Okay, I think there's two sides to this, really. I think obviously at its basis, it's just a love of music. So the love of music drove me to want to DJ in the first place. But actually, now I find it therapeutic. When you first start to let's say beat match. So beat match. So you have two records. You put them on your turntables, and you match the beat. So you have the BPMs at the same tempo, and you match it and you blend it. But it's actually quite stressful to begin with, because you see your favorite DJ in a club, and they're doing it effortlessly. But when you first try and do it, or when I first ever began, it's like, oh God, this is not straightforward. But when you actually get to a point where you master the basics of it, then you're concentrating on hearing your favorite tune, blending two tunes together so they make one tune, using different effects, using kind of reverb and echo, and stopping a tune at a certain point and bringing a vocal in for another tune, and thinking about the whole journey, not thinking, because at the start, when you're first learning, you're just excited to be able to match the two tunes together. But after that, you almost, you kind of transcend that, and you're actually thinking about what's the whole journey? Am I going to play a more heavy, more louder, heavy, rowdy tune, and then I'm going to mix it into a really sweet, melodic, chill tune, and the midpoint where they meet, what does that sound like? And I think to get to that kind of therapeutic state, you have to master the basics first to be able to get into that kind of flow, really. And obviously I'm kind of at that stage now where I can kind of get into that flow, so it's like I've almost I've mastered the craft in a way. I'm not Cole Cox, but I could do the basics, so that now it becomes more therapeutic, because I'm thinking of almost like the wider journey of what I'm doing. Yeah,
it's like, I feel like Justin, when you talk about that more transcendent experience, what comes across is that sense of freedom of expression that's happening there. So getting if I could call it the mechanics, getting the mechanics right. I love that you learned on vinyl. At Centre for Music, we're always trying to persuade our students, but have a go on the vinyl though, but because it's a much slower process, isn't it, than learning digital techniques that they can use now with your kind of beat matching using a screen. I mean, it's like, come on, I can do this. And I am not a DJ. So the vinyl, you make physical contact. And so then once you've got that going, then you can get that expressive point. And I was also really interested, Justin, in the fact that you said you've talked about your love of music, but I think it's much more than that. I think it's because of the way that you can perceive music. If you taught yourself to be able to hear chord sequences, that's a different perception level about what it is. That isn't what most people are going for or looking to do or even thinking about, to be honest. And I think that perception of the musical elements is what is taking you into that free space, because then you've got something to express, thinking about the journey of where you're going to go. And even if it's just you on your own in your man cave, there's some freedom of expression that's happening there, which has been enabled because of your facility on the equipment, the skill with the mechanics, if you like, but because you can feel the music in a certain way and imagine conveying something particular with what you're combining. Do you know what I mean? I love it. I feel very excited about that. Now, for those of you who are listening, and if you've listened to other episodes, you'll know that in this podcast, we like to make jokes about Sam and his chats about flow. I happen to also be very interested in flow as a musician. So I'm going to invite Sam to come back in and maybe just grill Justin a little bit more about the nature of this transcendent state and what it feels like and what it gives us.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how to take that, to be honest. As if we're looking for an excuse to shoehorn this in. But it does lend itself. I mean, obviously, you can hear it in how Justin's describing your experience, and effectively that's what it is. At bottom, it's an experiential state, isn't it? And you've talked there about the challenge side of things, and how initially the challenge is possibly outweighing your skill level, but it's persisting with that and takes considerable effort. So here's a crossover with the serious leisure work here. But then through that and through trying different things, you're able to balance that out. And you were talking about how now there's almost like an automation of that skill, and that's really what I was trying to get at with the craft piece, because it doesn't start out as a craft as such, does it? It starts out as a very kind of haphazard, experimental, try things out. Is it right? Is it wrong? All that kind of stuff. But that emergent motivation that you were describing there about, oh, now I can do that now. Now I'm going to try and play with the reverb or the bass or whatever. And you start to add another kind of layer onto that. So then you start talking about mastery. But at bottom, you were fundamentally, you came back to, and it's just because I love music. And when we talk about flow, it's described as an autotelic experience. And autotelic means auto it's Latin, right? So auto is self and telic is goal. So it's a self goal. So the actual doing of the core activity of mixing or making music is the motivation. So when you talk about that kind of therapeutic piece, I get that. I get the same kind of thing when I'm I'm very into kind of fitness and working out, and it's a similar kind of thing for me in that space. It's for want of a better term, my Zen space, if you like. It's an opportunity for me to lose myself in something I know I can do and play around with. I mean, it kind of links in with this idea of play as well. You get to a certain level of mastery, and there's an element of play to start with as well. You're always playing around with, is it this or is it that? Putting these two things together. Oh, look, there's a combination of things here that work. But then there's that kind of intentional play when you get to a certain level of mastery, which what I'm hearing in what you're saying, in kind of the latter portions of your description there. And I wonder whether you could elaborate on that aspect for us in terms of that play component, and how whether I mean, I've written a couple of things down in terms of, it's an opportunity for you to express your own creativity, in that sense, but that only comes at a certain point of when you feel comfortable and competent in X. So I wonder whether you could just elaborate on that, that play component. I mean, I love the fact I'm going to go upstairs, and it comes back full circle to playing with your toys, right? So I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to play with my toys. Now, it was a throwaway line, but actually when we're talking about it in this context, it's, serious play, right?
And yeah, no, that's exactly it. It definitely does come down to playing with your toys, and looking at how my 4-year-old plays is exactly the same. He loves Spider-Man. So sometimes you speak to him, and particularly, I don't know if any of our listeners or any of you have watched Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse. That is his absolute favorite. So Miles Morales is his absolute favorite. So some days you speak to him and he's so immersed in it that he actually thinks he's Miles Morales. You say to him, his name's Milo. You say, Milo, he said, Milo Miles. And like, he's so immersed in it. And this is it. When I'm DJing at that moment, I am completely immersed in it. I am nothing, I'm in the moment. I'm so in the moment that nothing else is even entering my thoughts, which is that meditative state, that kind of therapeutic state. And I'm doing things that are completely instinctive. And actually, sometimes I will finish DJing and think to myself, how or why did I do that? Why did I spin back that tune at that time? Why did I decide to keep these two tunes playing next to each other at that time and be dancing like a madman with no one else in the room? It's just completely in the zone. And actually, to be fair, it's not even though, a lot of my experiences now are in my own room by myself or recording my radio show. I think this even extends to when I've played in clubs or when I'm playing in clubs. There used to be times when I would be DJing and I would forget I'm in the club. If that sounds funny, I would look up and there would be, a few hundred people there. And actually it's interesting because you can come to a point where you almost become too aware, and that stops you being in that state. And you don't want to be too aware. Like I would look up, I would be so involved with what I'm doing and actually enjoying what I'm doing. And as I say, it would, it would just take control of my body and my movements. And then I would look up and I think, oh my God, I've got a room full of people and they're all just like puppets on string. Like they are waiting for me and they're reacting to everything I do. And there will be moments I think, no, snap out of it and get back in the zone. Yeah.
Thanks, Justin. I'm just going to use this as an opportunity again for our regular listeners to show that I will ask Sam a question about flow, and I will allow him to say something about flow. So, Sam, given what you just heard about from Justin, would you tell us a little bit about the passage of time and flow? And also, when we talk about flow, could you mention the name of the theorist we're talking about as well, please? Thank you.
I'd be happy to, Petya. Yes. I'm actually more interested in the immediate term with what Justin's just been describing in terms of that, lack of self-awareness, that lack of sense of self, which is, because of that intense focus on the core activity of, doing that thing at that time, and you're immersed in that. You're not, your sense of self is then lost, and that's one of the key kind of features of the flow state. And for me, it's interesting because certainly when you're starting something new, even though there's an interest in that core activity, sometimes the self-consciousness of doing something for the first time can get in the way, can't it? It can stop you. And I know Petya's talked about her work with improvisational comedy and overcoming that particular hurdle, and Kat's spoken before as well in the other realms of music, but you can see this all realms of life, but that self-consciousness becomes secondary to the doing of the activity, that self-goal, that autotelic kind of experience, and it's called the paradox of the self in the flow theory. And the theorist in question here is Csikszentmihalyi, who unfortunately is no longer with us anymore. But the whole flow literature stems back to the kind of late 60s, early 70s. Very similar, actually, to kind of the timeline of the Serious Ledger perspective. They actually grew up together academically, if you like. But the passage of time, the way you're describing it's very often in flow, people describe it, time stands still. It's just not something that we're aware of. It's not something I'm thinking of. It's not important to the doing of the task. Yeah. And, time flies when you're having fun. You hear all these different kind of analogies and turns of phrase, and it's all kind of speaking to the same thing. But it's really about that intensity of focus, and being in the moment, and noticing only that in the moment. And you've mentioned a couple of terms in terms of it being therapeutic, that meditative state. Mindfulness comes into this as well in terms of being a very similar kind of state of playing. And I think we are so time poor typically in everything we do. I mean, I was joking at the start of the podcast before we recorded about how many meetings I've had this week. I've had no time to do anything really other than be in a room talking to people about other stuff. But to find that kind of activity where it doesn't matter what else is going, time doesn't matter. This is my time. I'm focusing on this task. And I think that's, I think everybody listening will have that one thing, or maybe if you're lucky, a couple of things that they do. They give them that kind of experience where it goes, right, okay, I might only have half an hour, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to focus on doing this one thing that I love and playing around with it, or trying something new or whatever. But in that space at that time, that's all that matters. Of course, it can go the other way. It's not a universal good in the sense that there are certain times when you should really be concentrating on what's going on around you, and can cause, in some cases, injury if you're thinking about things like downhill skiing or anything like that. But then in that particular space, part of the experience is a heightened awareness of your environment and everything else. So it's really interesting to hear you describe the experience in those terms, because it's the confluence or the crossover for me between taking something very seriously but letting go. And I love that. But I'm going to stop there because I could probably take on the rest of the episode.
Can I ask, Justin, whether this kind of relaxation space or this kind of transcendental space, is this really just a very recent aspect of your music activity, or do you observe snippets of that, even going right back into the sort of fascinating history that you shared with us at the beginning of the episode?
I think maybe it's just something I've recently become aware of. I just haven't really reflected on it as much before. But sort of in my kind of history, I think no, I don't think I was. I think when I was younger, I was probably like most people in their teenage years, just not very confident, but insecure and stuff. So I was always, I just wasn't very confident. So I don't think I really got into that state. Maybe I'm also really into football as well. So I still play football now, like for a Sunday league team. And that's the other time I'm probably getting into into the zone, if you like, into that kind of flow state. So maybe the only other time in my life was, I've played football since my younger years, really, early teens, etc. So that's probably the only other time I've kind of been aware maybe of it.
Okay, so I know Sam wants to come in here, so just one last thing before I hand over to him. So then I'm thinking, I wonder then, what is the nature of the enjoyment that music has been giving you in these different seasons that's held you in all this time? So now, like busy family life, right? There's this like beautiful, peaceful place with the DJing that is like a break from like adulting, which we all hate. What was the nature then of the hook there, is this expression Sam will often use? What was that enjoyment like in the other life stages?
Yeah, a very good question. I think initially, when I was really young, it was just love music. But I think when I kind of got into my teenage years, it became more of a social pursuit, really, and more of a thing that you kind of listen to or speak about. I used to speak about my friends, or as I say, do rap duos and all this sort of stuff. So I found, I think everyone's looking for some sort of acceptance on some sort of level, so things where you can be part of a community or, just find friendship groups. People seem to kind of move towards. And I think that probably drove a lot of my passion, 50-50. I was passionate for it anyway, but then I found, actually I can get more friends, or more other people are into the same thing, so I can kind of make more connections. So that's something that's definitely driven it. Moving the whole way through university, say going clubbing, then doing a club night. People, it becomes when you run a club night or whatever, or you DJ, there gets a bit of ego involved as well, I guess. So people will end up liking you, because really for their own means, because they want to get into a club night free, or they want to say they know a DJ or whatever. So there's part of that, but at the very basis, obviously, I just absolutely love music. And then as I've become a parent, Now I understand more. There is an escapism element to it. And, you know, for everyone who's a parent, your life is just, there's just busy. Like, there's just a lot of noise. Like, you're at work, you're constantly busy. You go home, you're onto your second job, which is, you know, kind of dealing with your kids and your family. So any moment you can get to immerse yourself in something, you really cherish it, and music allows you to do that, and not only just DJing it, actually just listening to it. You know, I'm in the office today. I specifically, probably the main reason I come into the office more than a lot of people in my office, I'm coming in kind of 3 times a week, is because I get to walk to work 45 minutes. And in that 45 minutes, I just get to listen to music and really, you know, really just immerse myself into it. I don't even notice I'm walking. I don't notice I'm walking, you know. People, if a crime happened nearby and someone said, were you here at this time? I'll say, yeah. And then if they ask, oh, did you see this? I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what was happening around me. I was immersed, you know. So, yeah, just having that space to immerse myself. I've definitely, as I've become a parent, especially, I totally value it.
Man, we're almost at the end of our time, Justin, but this just opens up a huge area that I'm very passionate about myself, about music listening and what it can be like, even if you don't have the affinity with music that you have. That immersive capability of listening and how it can affect your mood and almost take you out of the moment in a way, like in the best possible way. It's just amazing to hear you describe that. Petya, I'm going to hand back to you now, as we're almost at the end of our time.
Thanks, Kat. I have a feeling someone's to come in first before we bring this to a close.
It's just an observation. It's not another question. But you know, that it's fascinating to hear, and I think anybody listening, you know, will hear parallels in. I mean, you're very articulate, Justin, in terms of how you're able to, you know, explain and describe the experience. And I have a similar kind of thing with the commute to work. So I drive 45 minutes, and it's the only uninterrupted time twice a day that I get where I can do pretty much whatever I want within reason in the car. And it's podcasts and music. And it's, you know, I don't get another opportunity. I come home and it's, you know, noise, chaos, you know, until 9 o'clock. And then I'm done. I haven't got any energy to do anything else. But there's a couple of observations. Firstly, you know, you say you do this and you do that, you find this experience in these places. But and again, I can hear it in what you're saying in terms of the search for that experience. You go searching it. Sometimes you don't find it. Sometimes you go to these places, and the reason's best known to somebody else. It just doesn't happen. But because of that experience, and Kat's talking about the aesthetic value of this as well, you're drawn back. And you're drawn back to those things where you're able to experience and express yourself in these ways. And I think, you know, that's foundational to this podcast, is, you know, all of the people's serious pursuits that we've heard about throughout the course of the podcast. It's what they return to, because it's what that activity gives them back, you know, and it's a significant amount of investment. It's a lifelong passion of yours. So that search for this particular experience, or, you know, is fascinating to me. And given time, I'd love to get a bit more deeply into it. But I did want to just emphasize or comment on, I guess, something that's been like an undertone all the way through. And that's the attachment and the identification with that particular social world of music. You know, it was all the way through, you know, the narrative piece you did at the start, and something you've just mentioned there, in terms of, yeah, okay, I might be busy over here doing other things, and I might not be able to immerse myself in the social world as much as I'd like, but it's still something I'm very much attached to and I identify with. And again, that's something that is, you know, universal, in the sense that, you know, it's something that all of the serious leisurists, for want of a better term, that we've spoken to on this podcast would share with you, you know, that attachment to a social world. And actually your radio show gives you that line in, doesn't it? So you've sought out an opportunity to stay current, stay connected, which I love. And the way you talk about it, I could listen to you all day.
Thanks, Sam. And it was interesting. Justin was nodding vigorously at your comment about the link to the social world via his radio show. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So all that we have time for now is for me to thank Justin for his time and sharing his story with us, and for those of us here in this room, reminding us about our youth and our clubbing and our cassette tapes. So I think it was really interesting for me to come to this and listen to this from that perspective, not necessarily somebody who is deeply involved in music, but somebody who was on the receiving end of DJing some years back. 2, maybe 3 years back, right, everybody? Yeah? Okay. Anyway, so thank you, Justin, Kat, and Sam, for a fascinating conversation. Goodbye, everyone. Until next time, when we continue to talk about leisure, work, and well-being, and what we can all do to engage with leisure seriously. Goodbye.